Hello, everybody, and welcome to this deep dive of the 1978 album, Hemispheres. Filling in for Ryan, so I'm Jim. I'm filling in for Ryan, so you don't get to hear him prattle on. You get to hear me prattle on instead. A little different, right? There we go. All right, so as we always start out with, I am going to read from The Art of Rush, this wonderful book by Hugh Syme. Let me find no, that's not it. Hemispheres. All right, here we go. All right, Hemispheres. Sometime during the summer of 1978, Hugh Syme strode into the medical department of the University of Toronto and made an unusual request. He wondered if, by chance, they might have a spare brain lying around that he could photograph. It couldn't have been easy for Hugh to describe the cerebral conceit for the cover of Hemispheres. He envisaged an image in which two men regard each other warily from opposite sides, or the hemispheres of the brain. Perfect. And they are actually not men at all. They are the representations of the Greek gods Apollo and Dionysus. And they have a somewhat different sensibility when it comes to sartorial matters. But that's not their only disparity. During the opening track of Hemispheres, Neil Peart's lyric describes a dispute between the two deities that is the stuff of legend. As the album cover suggests, Rush's version is a tad less orthodox than the story you learned in Classics 101. To recap it, Hemispheres continues the story of an astronaut's odyssey that started with Cygnus X-1 Book 1, The Voyage on a Farewell to Kings. That record ends with the astronaut spaceship, the Rocinante, plunging into a black hole. Cygnus X-1 Book 2, Hemispheres, lead off the track on Rush's sixth studio album. Like the astronauts in Planet of the Apes in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and long before then, Jonathan Swift's character Gulliver, the pilot of the Rocinante, discovers he has entered another realm altogether. He has arrived at Olympus, home to the 12 gods of Greek legend. The celestial kingdom is at war. Apollo, the bringer of wisdom, and Dionysus, the bringer of love, are engaged in a struggle to control the fate of man. Our hero finds himself caught in the middle of the two sides. It's an allegory, of course, for the eternal conflict between the head and the heart. Or to be more anatomically accurate, the contradictory signals of the left brain and the right brain. The former is thought to be the focus of reason and objectivity. The latter is home to intuition and subjectivity. I sent Hugh the lyrics and he extrapolated his own interpretation of the Apollo-Dionysus dichotomy, says Neil. Hugh's surrealist concept was inspired by the images of Salvador Dali, Rene Magritte, and Hypnosis, the British art design group who created album covers for the likes of Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. All he needed was to get hold of a brain for the cover illustration. Once Hugh had obtained permission from the medical faculty at the university, as well as the family of the deceased, he found himself inside the cold, starkly lit basement of the medical department at the University of Toronto, stocked with human cadavers and body parts that had been lopped off, operated on, anatomically illustrated. It was a lab only Dr. Frankenstein could love. All these years later, Hugh still recalls the stench of the place. He was presented with a brain that had been marinating in a jar of formaldehyde. It looked as inviting to touch as an electric eel. Hugh described it as a pickled dollop of thoughtless pudding. I didn't want to take the gelatinous blancmange thing out and shoot it. I thought I'd really not handle the real brain. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want to shoot it through the glass either. Fortunately, the medical department had a model of the brain on hand too. It seemed much more manageable than an actual photograph, says Hugh. It was a beautiful model. The same description could certainly apply to the Toronto-based ballet dancer who posed naked as Dionysus for the picture. Dionysus represents right brain creative types. His prose represents a primal unity with nature and, in helping with the Greek legend, a measure of foolishness. By contrast, Apollo is dressed like an archetypal businessman to represent the sector of society with left brain proclivities. His migrate light bowler hat and suit is symbolic of Apollonian forces that shape civilization. In the objective detachment, in the birth of tragedy, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche characterizes Apollo, the god of light and reason, as a force for objective detachment and restraint. Accordingly, Hugh rendered his version of Apollo stiff and orderly. Bob King, who previously posed as the Starman for the cover of 2112, posed as Apollo. And from what I'm reading, it sounds like he was happy that he could have clothes on this time. There's a tension in the image as the two gods stand opposite each other. At the top of the painting is the band's name. Looks like it was written in blood. Geddy refers to it as a murderous crawl. Hugh thinks of this as a wretched elegance. The Rush lettering is one of my favorites of all time, adds Neil. Very subtle and beautiful, and the blue hues echo Farewell to Kings a little bit. The back cover of Hemispheres reveals two additional brains floating above what appears to be an alien and barren landscape. The three organs aren't so much gray matter as they are saturated orange umber shade. It makes for a more vibrant and hypnotic image. Hugh even extended the visual theme to the labels of the vinyl record, which featured a picture of floating halves of a brain. So Hugh, I'm not going to read all of the rest of this, but it does say that Hugh looks back on this creation with mixed emotions. And at the end, it is a very forward-thinking concept, but love it or loathe it, and there are Rush fans in both camps. The Hemisphere cover does one thing very successfully. It tells the listener that the songs on the album boast lofty ambition and otherworldly sounds. That's pretty cool. Oh, and that is a heavy book.
So Hugh Syme literally said to himself, "If I only had a brain."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, this cover, I've always loved this cover. I've always thought this cover was really, really cool. Just very interesting. There you go. That's a bigger picture. Yeah, the front and the back.
Yeah.
It's a very, in a way, I think it's very simple, like sparse, right? There's not a lot of different things to look at, right? But the things that are there, I think that makes them really stand out and gives them a lot of meaning. That's my view on it, at least.
It was recorded at a time when there was this big debate going on in the psychological community. And we've discussed in other deep dives what a reader Neil was. And psychology was one of the many things he was fascinated by. Okay. And the big debate was, which is more influential, the right brain, the left brain, are they both equally, this and that. And this was a debate that was going on. He did a lot of reading about it. And of course, the Hemispheres thing, they loved puns. So you got your pun about the hemispheres of the brain.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love it. All right, any other comments on the cover?
I love that logo. If they were going to pick one logo to use, if they'd asked the fans, I really like that one. I don't know why, but I've always really liked that particular logo.
It's so unique. This one thing I love. One thing I love many things about Rush, but their logo is like changes every single album. But this one it just seems so different. And it really stands out to me. I love this logo too. A great one.
And this is also talk about taking chances. The Starman with the naked, and then this thing with the naked. Yeah. It isn't too far removed from the time when you could get into a lot of trouble for showing too much skin on an album, whether you were male or female. I think we forget in 2022 that in the 1960s, 70s, even into the 80s, there were a lot of rules and there were a lot of record stores that like wouldn't carry certain, they just put a sticker over the record if they thought it was showing too much skin.
Yep.
And of course happened to the original version of Blind Faith.
Yeah.
And I can think of several others as well. I have, visions in my mind of somebody placing a sticker over the butt of the.
Yeah, it's very true. And there's bands who had to change their album covers, like Bon Jovi had to change Slippery When Wet, for example.
Absolutely.
That's pretty tame by today's standards.
But
Scorpion.
that's exactly my point. I mean, we look at the Starman, or we look at this, and we're like, what was the fuss?
Scorpions had
at the time there was a fuss.
Yeah.
So my cover, I'm sorry, has been defaced by a Sharpie. You can see it says "To Brendan from Geddy."
Oh, what a shame!
Yes.
I'm sorry that I had the cover desecrated like that, but it was for a good cause.
Of course, he has to do a little name dropping in here. Oh God, it's so hot in here. Let me just put down my autograph of Geddy.
I would welcome that. That's
under what
awesome.
circumstances did he autograph that?
So that was in 2000 when My Favorite Headache came out, and he did a signing in New Jersey. He would do one personalized autograph, and then he would do one signed copy of My Favorite Headache, which I have over there. And I've always loved Hemispheres, and so there was really no, it wasn't a hard choice as far as what to have Geddy sign for me.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah, he was doing some of that when he was working the bookstores just before the pandemic with his book of bass. And he was doing some personalized autographs with respect to that as well, except it was such a heavy book.
Right.
Well, and I did get Geddy to sign my book of bass, so that was great as well.
As did I.
I feel left out.
I got Donna Halper to sign my first album on 8-track. I'm pretty psyched about that.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. He also sent me a blank check in the hopes that I'd sign that, but nice try.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right. Yes, this is an awesome album cover, and the autograph album that's really special. That's great.
It's just an amazing album, seriously. I
mean, it is.
Yeah, we say that about a lot of albums, but it just really holds together well.
It does. It does. And and usually, like for anybody watching with these deep dives, we pick 4 tracks that are probably a little bit lesser known or a little bit more deep tracks, I guess. But for this one, there's only 4 tracks on the album. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. And today we are going to go in reverse song length order. So we are going to start with Circumstances. Tim, it's all you, man.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, this album has a very, very unique character to it. It's still the Terry Brown producing, but it has a very unique sound to it. The chords the band was using, very, very distinctive on this album. There's sort of like a natural. I know Alex was getting into using a lot of chorus on his guitars. The guitars are very, very full. It's been said that a lot of the songs for this were written just kind of acoustically, and then when they went in to record the vocals, Geddy realized everything was as high as he sang back then, or just higher still. So he really had a hard time completing the vocals on this. This album is definitely the end of an era. I know that's a common narrative, but it is very true. Permanent Waves is a very, very different sounding album from Hemispheres. And I'm glad that we have all these eras to talk about and discuss. But where we're concentrating on Hemispheres, when I first got into Rush, this was the second to last studio album that I picked up. So it was the second to last studio album that I heard all the way through. So already having Exit Stage left, I was familiar with the Trees and La Villa. And I mean, I had Farewell to King, so I knew the first part of the Cygnus saga, as it were. But Circumstances is kind of the only quote unquote regular song on here. And boy, do I love it. I think it's got a really aggressive but still melodic riff. The time signature shifts all over the place. I love the lyrics. The lyrics are Neil getting very autobiographical and talking about a version of himself from, I would say, probably 6, 7, 8 years previous, this period when he lived in London. I love the fact he incorporates a little bit of French, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, which means the more things change, the more they stay the same. The lyrics say a lot. They're kind of a precursor maybe to Subdivisions, about not fitting in and being your own self. So I related to those, when I first heard them as a 14-year-old. I love the middle section in the middle where it breaks down. You get that really cool synth line, and then the whole band comes back in, and again, the time signatures are all over the place. But and I don't know, it's just a really cool song. I was really glad when Snakes and Arrows Live came out. I only saw them on R30, but when Snakes and Arrows Live came out, they revived Circumstances. It was a very welcome addition to the set. And I just, the other tracks on this album are all great, but they've all been talked about to some extent. Mm-hmm. Circumstances is kind of the only one. It wasn't a single, and it didn't become a concert staple. So that means that there are a lot of casual Rush fans. If you only have like a couple of the live albums and Chronicles and Retrospective or whatever, this song you would miss otherwise. You got to get the album to hear it. So I'd love to see some more people get into the song Circumstances, because it's just a great example of how Rush were learning to create more compact songs. It's 3 minutes and 42 seconds long. It's still got plenty of prog moments with all of the time signatures, lots of tricky bits to it, but still a melodic song. So I was happy to have to talk about this one. I don't have much more to say about it other than it's a great song and it needs more listens.
Oh yeah, it for sure needs more listens. I mean, this is, it's such a short song, like you say, like far shorter than anything else on this album, but it's so like musically upbeat. I mean, the song drives forward. It's been one of my favorites, and it's kind of a shame that it was never a single, because you would think with a short song, the only short song on this album, that would like lend itself to be the single. Like there's nothing else to choose from, right?
Yeah. It's kind of odd it wasn't put out as they didn't try it.
And if I could make a friendly reminder here, and we do this every time we do a deep dive, if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever, and you're screaming at the screen at this moment, can't you see that it means, leave us a comment. We would we read the comments, we respond to the comments. A lot of times people will come up with an interpretation that we didn't have, or a reaction, because in many cases, some of these little hidden gems, like Tim mentioned, like why doesn't this get more into every Rush album has a song like that. Every one of them has a song where people are like, well, it's really obvious that this is the song that everyone should have listened to. And please, we welcome your comments. Make sure you let us know how you feel.
Yeah, thanks, Don, for sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You guys have anything to add to Circumstances?
Just Circumstances, for me, it's one of the, I remember in high school, it's one of the first Rush songs that I ever kind of felt spoke to me. And even though I didn't even really necessarily fully understand what it was about, just as a kind of a, I was kind of a kid from Subdivisions, as a little bit of a lonely kid. There you go, Tim, you as well. I was kind of a lonely kid, kind of a nerdy kid. Had a couple of friends, and Circumstances was just one of those songs where when I listened to it, I felt that connection. I felt like I was one of the folks that Neil was speaking to.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, that's great. All right, Circumstances, the song that I'm going to say that I think should have been a single. All right, so the next longest song talks about a I guess an argument, or we'll let Donna kind of say what it's really going to talk about. But the maples and the oaks kind of have some words for each other.
And the final score is the maples won and the oaks.
Yeah.
So once upon a kingdom far away, there were some maples and some oaks, and they were just kind of slugging it out. The Trees is a very interesting song. Neil said it wasn't, but I think he was just downplaying it. I have a quote from him from 1980 where he was asked about it, and he was just, oh, no, I was working on something entirely different. I saw a cartoon of some trees acting like fools, and I thought to myself, wow, what if trees acted like people? It was just, inspired by a cartoon. I think, no. I think he had something in mind. And while I'm not a good mind reader, I think we could all agree that Neil was very influenced, not just by philosophy, but by mythology, and also by the archetypal battle between good and evil, and the battle of the sexes. Now, this is where I have an interpretation that's going to be a little different from everyone else's, okay? Second wave feminist here, won't apologize for it, nothing to apologize for. I have had my share of debates and discussions with a number of rock stars over the years about some of their lyrics that I thought were kind of sexist, okay? And I understand. I mean, it was like guys being guys, and I get it. I mean, I can have fun listening to a rock song just like anybody else. You change the pronouns if you have to. We've all done it. This is the guy singer, so you change it to a girl singer. But this is a little different, okay? Now, first of all, let's keep in mind that they love mythology, Neil in particular, and the trees represent something in mythology, okay? Oak trees, if you've ever looked it up, they're taller, they're stronger, and it is no accident that in Greek mythology, they represent the king of the gods, Zeus. In fact, Zeus's favorite tree is the oak tree because it's a symbol of power and strength. A nice, easy step from that, manliness, okay? Now, the maple tree, now this is interesting because the maple tree, for all you Canadians, the maple leaf, hello, okay? But on the other hand, in literature, the maple tree symbolizes balance, longevity. It also symbolizes adaptability. It can grow in all kinds of environments, okay? So why the maple? Why the oak? Okay, there is unrest in the forest. There is trouble with the trees. For the maples want more sunlight and the oaks ignore their pleas. Nice and simple, just like Neil was talking about. What if trees acted like people? But it's the next couple of verses that lead me to believe there's more going on here. Very simple song. Trouble with the maples, and they're quite convinced they're right. They say the oaks are just too lofty, and they grab up all the light. Now, here's where I come up with my interpretation. But the oaks can't help their feelings if they like the way they're made, and they wonder why the maples can't be happy in their shade. The whole time I was growing up, every woman I know, including me, we were just told that men are superior and that women should be happy, just like serving. Like, isn't it nice to make tea? Isn't it nice to make dinner? Why would you ever want to do anything else? It's nice to be a homemaker. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being a homemaker. My mother was an excellent homemaker. I bowed before her. But it's not for everyone. And not everyone wants to be a homemaker. And some people wanted to have choices in their life. And yet the dominant discourse in the culture, including, I am sure, when Neil was growing up, was that there were gender roles. Men did this, Women did that. And the women should be content to get less shade because after all, it's about being grateful. But the women, I'm sorry, the trees, like the maples, they're not happy. They don't understand why they have to be happy with less shade. Why can't they have equal shade? There's trouble in the forest and the creatures all afraid, and the maples scream oppression. Notice the maples scream. Oh my God, women are shrill. They scream. But what's wrong with wanting equal rights? What's wrong with wanting equal opportunities? What's wrong with not having to be in someone else's light or happy with someone else's shade? No, the maples scream oppression. Many of us in the women's movement frequently talked about the fact that women in that culture, as were minorities, we were oppressed. We got less pay. We didn't get the same opportunities. If we were out on the road working, people assumed we were someone's girlfriend and they tried to put the moves on us. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. I'm sorry. It was not a golden age if you were female. It really wasn't. Okay. Not me complaining. I've had a wonderful life, kids. I've met some wonderful people, but I've also had some people do stuff or try to do stuff that they should not have done. I don't talk about it much, but they shouldn't have done it, okay? And they wouldn't have done it if I weren't female. And there are other women that could tell you the same story. So the women, I'm sorry, the maples, they're screaming, okay? And they're saying that they're oppressed, and the maples form a union, how dare they, and demand equal rights. The shame of it all. They say the oaks are just too greedy. We will make them give us life. Now there's no more oak oppression, for they passed a noble law, and the trees are all kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw. So yeah, the women got what they want. They're equal now, but the men had to give up something. Why? Why? How come everybody didn't compromise? It's not about some law that made the women equal. I'm sorry, we already were equal, and we should have been treated equal. Now, in fairness to Neil, it was a different time. It was a different space. And while he would probably say to you if you asked him, oh no, this wasn't written about the male-female battle of the sexes, the language tells me that, yeah, it was. And please feel free to disagree with me. Please feel free to think I'm completely off base. It is certainly a possible interpretation to interpret as like, you know, one side represents America, one side represents Canada, or one side represents, you know, Team Red and one side represents Team Blue. You can do almost anything with this song. It lends itself to all kinds of interpretations. But I say there really was oppression. And I say that some of those laws didn't just force everyone to be equal. Some of them kind of opened up the space for people to decide to treat each other more fairly. And I see that as a good thing. So I don't think there should have been trouble with the trees. But don't we always turn everything into an argument? And maybe the message is we shouldn't turn everything into an argument. We should create the space and save the light for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I've never thought of the interpretation the way that you've described it, but it's.
I'm going to get people hating on me. I can.
Oh no. Well, they shouldn't, because I think you're right. I think it's some, this could be looked at as, one team versus, or one group versus another, not really versus, but there's one group and another group, and things are not exactly the same between
right brain versus left brain, hemisphere.
Exactly. Kind of fits perfectly on this album.
Yeah. I think it's a great interpretation. I think that the beauty of so many of Neil's lyrics and Rush's songs is that you can, you can take all kinds of different things from it. Ryan, as some of you may recall, gave a really fascinating analysis of chemistry from Signals, where he said this song is about the band. It's about the synergy of the band. I was like, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
And I wrote a Spotlight Saturday about the trees for the Rush fans site. And, I said, well, what's your interpretation of this song? Is it just a cartoon, as Neil said? And someone commented and said, oh, no, it's common knowledge. And I no disrespect to this commenter, but I often, raise an eyebrow when I see common knowledge. But this commenter said it's common knowledge that this is Neil's commentary on Soviet communism and the struggle between the working class and the upper class, and the hatchet, axe, and saw are a metaphor for the hammer and sickle of the worker. Okay. Again, another interpretation.
Yeah. Anything's possible. And all Neil would have said is, think for yourself, make your own
there you
decision.
go.
But Neil never went for the easy metaphor, okay? He never went for well, it's obvious that this means this. And having talked to him more than once, I found that very often he liked it when people thought about his lyrics. And that's why he tried so hard to avoid just being obvious. A lot of times what seems like it means something on one level, there could be a whole nother level of meaning. Could it possibly be about communism? Yeah, I suppose. I mean, he was still going through his Ayn Rand phase back then, and good old Ayn Rand was originally from Russia. She rejected it. She didn't like them, blah, blah, blah. It's possible. But I never knew him to be an ideologue. I never knew him to be like, marching in lockstep with any one set of beliefs. His mind is not for rent through any god or government. I mean, that was Neil. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's awesome.
I never thought of the whole Canada-US thing either. That's a really interesting.
Yeah.
This is about free trade.
I've seen
free trade.
That's my point. I've seen that interpretation.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people struggle with these lyrics.
Wow. But I think, and I think it was you who mentioned it, Donna, that Neil's lyrics, I think it was you, Neil's lyrics can be interpreted in many different ways. And that's one thing I've always loved about Neil's lyrics, is that it's not just, it is only this. It's interpretations of something. It makes you think.
I would be lying to you, Jim, if I said, of all the songs that Rush ever wrote or did, of all of them, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't the one that irritated me the most, because because again, as a female listener, my listening on some songs might be different from others, and I'm not expecting everyone to agree with my interpretation. I'm just saying the moment I heard it, I was like,
yeah, that's true.
No, I talked to a couple of women about it, and they got it.
Oh, yeah.
That's a possible interpretation for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, isn't that what we do this for? Because if it were all just, I lost my baby, bop, bop, shabop, doo-wah, there'd be nothing to interpret. It would be like, yep, there it is again. Yep. Okay. But one of the reasons we love this band is they make you think.
Yep.
And Neil never, in all the years I knew him, never expected to be agreed with, and he didn't want to be worshipped. Nothing made him more uncomfortable than people putting him up on a pedestal. It really bothered him. And that is a fact. And, some of you know this to be true, but he didn't want it. Okay.
Yeah.
He put it out there, and then it was like, here, do with this what you will.
Yeah. Yep. Very true.
Who's next?
Right. All right. Go ahead.
So let's take a break from talking about lyrics for a moment. Hemispheres, as I mentioned, is my favorite album. And La Villa Strangiato, subtitled An Exercise in Self-Indulgence. I realize we're talking about the songs out of order, but this is the album closer. And what a closer it is. Just over 9.5 minutes. Supposedly based on the vivid nightmares that Alex would have while touring. He would allegedly wake up Neil and Geddy to regale them about the bizarre stuff that was happening inside of his head. And there are so many things to be said about this amazing track. It's divided into 12 distinct parts. It begins with this kind of unassuming, yet also virtuoso classical guitar bit that transitions into this introduction that's about a minute and a half, where the guitar, the bass, the percussion are slowly building until we launch into this epic instrumental. This is a song where the band really challenged themselves, not only to write it and learn it, they then challenged themselves to record it all in one live take, which they couldn't quite do. They ended up splicing 3 parts together. Geddy later remarked that with continued practice, they could nail it in one take, but of course, this was recorded when it was brand new to them. Neil famously said that they worked harder on La Villa Strangiato than they did on the entire Fly By Night album. It's the first true Rush instrumental, one of the rare times when Neil is credited as co-writing the music. It contains, if I can just, speaking of worship, if I can just say, this contains what Alex considers to be his most notable guitar solo. There are plenty of fans who would agree. Such a beautiful, elegant solo and a mature solo. Alex often gets, I think, overshadowed by the fact that the 2 other musicians in the band were grandmasters, but this solo reminds us of Alex's talent as a composer and as a technical player and as a soulful player, really. Something else noticeable about this track, in the movement that's called Monsters, those of you who grew up watching Warner Brothers cartoons, as I did, and I think many of us did, you know, we all recognize that riff that goes dun 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 dun. That was borrowed from Raymond Scott's old big band number, Powerhouse, from the 1930s, and it really does, in my opinion, adds so much to this track. It gives it this kind of manic, goofy component. You can imagine it playing in Alex's nightmares, that I think really adds an appealing note. And just one final thought that's worth mentioning. So Mike Portnoy, of course, the Dream Theater drummer, himself a grandmaster musician, was quoted as saying that this was the ultimate musical challenge to learn because no other instrumental song in rock history had that level of technical precision. So those who dismiss Rush and some of their, as being derivative of some of their contemporaries, whether it be Led Zeppelin or what have you, I think they need to acknowledge that this track has a place in rock and roll history. No one had ever really attempted this. And these young, ambitious musicians did it, and they nailed it. And what can I say? It's a masterpiece, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm a lifelong fan of the Warner Brothers cartoons. I mean, I've got DVD sets of them, and they're some of my favorite comedy writing of all time. And you know, Mel Blanc was just such a genius.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, it's pretty obvious to me that the guys in the band agreed, because not only did they use Powerhouse, but in later years when they would play Red Barchetta live, at the end of it, you could hear Daffy Duck say, "No more for me, thanks. I'm driving."
Yes.
from one of the Duck Season, Wabbit Season cartoons. So
no more for me, thanks. I'm driving.
I thought that was pretty cool. Also, it's the only instrumental I've ever seen that has lyrics. I had this on cassette first, but then when I got the vinyl and I saw how it was broken up into all these parts, all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, it's like a returning theme. It made sense to me, like Monsters, and then Never Turn Your Back on a Monster, and then Monsters Reprise. And I also have to say that when I was in Toronto to see them in 2004, I stood at the intersection of Danforth and Pape, which is very, very unassuming. It's just an intersection. But I'm like, it's Danforth and Pape.
That's great.
I made my uncle stop the car. We were in Toronto. I made my uncle stop the car. I got out and I got a photo at Danforth and Pape. This was about 30. So I'm right there with you. And by the way, Tim, I don't have it to hold up in front of the screen like my Geddy autograph, but forgive me. Up there on the wall, I have to Brendan from Wile E. Coyote and Chuck Jones. It's a drawing that he.
Oh, yeah.
That's so cool, man.
I'm right there with you on the Warner Brothers as well.
Yeah, they're the best. And I love introducing like my kids. Like when my kids were little, I introduced them, and now I'm doing the same thing with a couple of my nieces. Like, you like cartoons? Let's show you the very best of the
Yeah.
best of the best, the
Yes.
funniest, the wittiest, and the ones that you remember when you get older, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden realize why certain lines were as funny as they were.
Yeah.
Sure.
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I love the Warner Brothers cartoons as well. I like you guys. I grew up on them watching every day when I was home from school. But for for La Villa, that is an incredible instrumental. It's actually my favorite Rush instrumental from their entire catalog. It is so complex, and things change. All the odd time signatures, the level of musicianship and the ability that the three of them have to execute that is just, it's mind-blowing, completely mind-blowing.
Agreed.
So great, so awesome. All right, well, now let's hit the longest one that we had. Side one. All right, the Hemispheres track. All right, this is a continuation from the book one of Voyage that was on A Farewell to Kings. So after our hero goes through that black hole in the Rocinante, he finds himself on Olympus, smack dab in the middle of a huge fight between Apollo, the god of reason, and Dionysus, the god of love. The funny thing is that the god of love is not Dionysus. Dionysus is traditionally the god of wine. But in this case, things changed a little bit. So a little bit of artistic freedom to make things as they are. I read somewhere that it was an excerpt from an article that according to Neil, and this was in Rush Visions that I read this, the song idea came from a book he was reading called The Powers of Mind. Exploring the conflict between reason and emotion, or feelings and the rational ideas, and it's kind of funny because he's used that in other songs as well. Prime Mover is a great example of the rational versus emotional kind of thing. So the lyrics in there kind of mention that too. But this song is I guess you could think of it as a fantasy or a mythology, or even kind of partially space voyage. But this really is a conflict that's in all of us, right? The heart versus mind kind of conflict. And of course, this thing starts off with the hemisphere chord, courtesy of Alex there. Numerous musical themes that are stated in this piece, and they are restated over and over again. And for anybody who may be like scratching their head on that, that is a very typical compositional technique. Many composers use that, and many soloists use that too. When they're playing solos, they will state a theme, play some, go back and state the theme again. There's some drummers who do that in their solos, very, very prominent drummers that do that in their solos. A lot of time signatures in this guy too. We're going, and it's changing all the time. It's not like here's this huge section of 12/8. Okay, here's a huge section of 4/4. It's like measure by measure almost. I mean, we're hitting 12/8, 7/8, 6/8, 5/8, 3/4, 4/4. There's more in there. I didn't bother to try to write them all out. Alex he's incorporating some beautiful harmonics in there. I love his harmonics. At the beginning of Red Barchetta always gets me from that reason, right? But he's got a lot of beautiful harmonics at the beginning. And in typical Rush fashion, the melody, at least how I sing the melody, it's sometimes a guitar, it's sometimes the bass. So Geddy will kind of play sort of melodic lines pretty often. So in Prelude, I'll try to not make this too long because it's a very long song. But in Prelude, we're introduced to the world, right, with Apollo and Dionysus. And the people are divided, and that lyric, every soul a battlefield, right? So that's kind of dividing to, delving to the people. And I think that is a very specific testament. I'm guessing that Neil meant it that way. But you know what? But I should mention though, in La Villa, this is true, and in Hemispheres, this is very true, and this is true in many of their songs, is that no one member is a standout. They are all stands out. It's just like a collective. And to me, that artistic collective makes this, you know, kind of I don't want to say a higher plane and sound kind of snooty, but I don't mean to sound snooty, but it brings their music to another level that is not there in all bands that are out there. So in Apollo, we got the bringer of wisdom, we got logic, reason, and order. You know, there people are introduced to concepts that maybe we take for granted: fire, food, shelter, you know, things like that. And then right in the middle of that, right, the musical theme is restated. So we're hearing things that we've heard before, right? All right, so they build their cities and they're like, okay, yeah, so now what? There's got to be more to how it is, right? And they wind up bailing and hanging out with Dionysus because that seems to be a lot more fun. But before they bail, right, the music is kind of moving from a slightly busy, chaotic themes to something a little bit more sparse and beautiful, and it's kind of going back and forth. It does that kind of throughout the song too. And Alex plays like, I don't know, 3 or 4 solos throughout this entire sidelong epic, with the first one being in Apollo, and it is incredible. It is just amazing. And I've said it, I don't know how many times before, Alex has a way of crafting his solo that really fits the song. It feels like it belongs, like it's I don't believe that his solos, he's composed them before, but they really do belong. It's not just, he's not just, you know, kind of shredding and riffing. He's using those themes, he's using that style, he's using kind of the emotion that's in the song, in his solo. And I think that's what makes them really beautiful.
And
All
I
right,
can tell you straight up,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
While
go,
it's
yes,
still on my
please.
mind. I can tell you straight up from having talked to other musicians, they have a lot of respect for Alex's musicianship. I mean, we always hear about Neil. I mean, and God bless him. I mean, there has never been another drummer like Neil. But both Geddy and Alex are respected by their peers a lot more than gets talked about. And I think that's an omission in many ways of the music press, because the music press really decided to focus everything on Neil, which I understand. But no kidding, what you were just saying about Alex, I could say that about a bunch of his solos.
Yes,
and we have, as we've done the deep dives, I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and gone, I mean, that is like a master class, okay? I mean, the guy is just, not because I like him, not because he's my friend, but like, the guy is such a talented musician.
He is very, very talented. And I have not had the pleasure to meet him, and I can still say he's very talented at that. So even coming from someone who's not met him, he's extremely talented. And you're right, he doesn't get the sort of general public respect that some of the other guitarists do. But yes, in the guitar circles, he is extremely highly regarded, and Geddy in the bass circles as well, for sure they are. All right, so no, that's great. Thank you for mentioning that. That is awesome. All right, so now these guys are all hanging out with Dionysus, the bringer of love. So we got music, laughter, joy, and fun. I mean, it's way more fun to hang out in the forest and drink wine and chat with people and dance around than to like actually work and build cities, right? So why not? You know, let's kind of hang out there. You know, but what's interesting, I think here is that the people went from one extreme, right? Your working extreme, you know, to your other extreme, like I'm just going to have fun extreme, right? And that going from one extreme to another, that still happens today. That still happened in the 80s. That still happened in the 90s. This happens, right? So it's this balance that we're looking for that we're going to get to, right? So at Armageddon, actually the groove gets changed, and I believe that groove gets changed to a triplet groove, 6/8 or 12/8 for all you music nerds, depending on how my sheet music that I was reading for the drum part was written at 12/8. But it's kind of the transition. I am not 100% sure. You guys could correct me here, right? If that transition happens still in the part 3 Dionysus at the end of it, or when Armageddon begins. I think they switch the groove towards the end of Dionysus, which gives a seamless transition into your next part, Armageddon, where you start talking about the battle itself. That's what I think. So I
think you're right, Jim, because I think that Neil does a pretty long fill that leads into the and you talk about like weird time signatures, and Alex has got a count. The beat drops out and then it comes back in, and we are not working.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yep. All right. So, and then at the end of Armageddon, where we have this battle, right? So we start towards the end of that, there's a lot of themes from The Voyage, from Farewell to King Set are restated. They're very quiet, they're in the background, kind of over this kind of ethereal kind of sounding keyboard thing. And it's really kind of neat how they musically wind up tying the two pieces together, to me, that way, right? They tied them together that way. So now Cygnus is looking at this chaos and he's like, the heck, man, this is wrong. This is not right. So his silent scream kind of jolts the gods, right? So they're like, what? And then the lyrics too, I forget, I didn't write down what they actually were, but one of them, I think it was Dionysus, thought him mad, right? Because he's like, well, what's going on here? So finally, right, they said, okay. So he brought balance to the struggle, and they say, the god of balance you shall be, right? And then go back into the theme, and man, that music is just rocking out at the end. And it's such a beautiful way to kind of end the epic, but you think it's over, right? But it's not quite over, because they get into the sphere, which is one of the prettiest pieces of music that I think Rush has ever written and recorded, which is the sphere. Alex's guitar, just so warm and welcoming. Geddy's voice just fits perfectly into there. And to me, the lyrics say, we're different, but we have the same goals, so let's work together. That's what it says to me. And I think that this song, this 18 whatever minute song, is a complete masterpiece. Go ahead.
Sorry, I love how Geddy approaches like an actor, like he did in 2112, like again in Armageddon, which might be my favorite part of the section. But there's an anger in his vocals and the effects that they have on his vocals. I don't know if they've doubled his vocals, but it's like it's louder than everything else, especially in the chorus. And when spirits are divided into blinded hemispheres, how it goes. If you're listening to with headphones, it goes from one side to the other, and it's so cool.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is awesome. And it's great that you bring up Geddy's vocal, because I think that's something that's not talked about enough. And he does that, like he did that in 2112 when during presentation, where the priests are angry and our hero is like, yeah, but guys, what? I mean, what's going on?
He's right? Very humble.
Very humble. He does that, like going back and forth. And even in some other songs, I can hear it and how he's singing it, either how he kind of like how he delivers, the message in the lyrics, I think is fantastic. And I would like to think that that's something that he's consciously thought about. He was not just caught up in the moment, but he was like, he's kind of angry here, so let me do something to get that. Right. So, but when I listen to this piece of music, I never think I never think, oh my gosh, did I just sit there for 18 minutes and listen to a song?
It flies by.
It does. Because I think it's because you've got those themes being restated, and you have things that are so different, and you have a story that's interesting to follow. You kind of got it all. I just love it. I love this tune.
I love the way Geddy sings "Unguided." That's like the angriest part. The people left unguided.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah.
We've talked a lot about Alex's solos, and of course, the solo at the end of Apollo is amazing. The way that he kind of wails on this high note, and then just as you're kind of recuperating from that, he kicks it up and he wails on this even higher note, and it's mind blowing. And then later in Cygnus, and it's not at the very end of the Cygnus section. It's after its surface splintered into sorry hemispheres, and then he comes in with that concluding solo, and it's so triumphant. It's so climactic. You feel like you've been on this journey, and now you've arrived, and you're near the end of this journey, and there's just this gorgeous climactic solo right before this final verse of that section, and then you go into the sphere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's amazing that Neil had a fantastic way to tell a story in words. I think the three of them, Geddy, Alex, and Neil, have a fantastic way to tell a story in song. Just the music, like La Villa, for example. I can follow that story. There's no lyrics there to follow, but I could follow that story in La Villa, just like I can in Hemispheres, just from the music. I think that's incredible. It's amazing.
And it took a lot out of the guys. If you read any interviews, they said that this was just an exhausting session, okay? And it comes through in the music. I mean, they didn't, that old baseball cliche about he left it all out on the field. They left it all out in the studio. I mean, there's nothing they didn't do, okay? I mean, they have never been a band that just mailed it in. That's just not how they are. But you can just feel the intensity. I can imagine how exhausting this was. I get tired just listening to it sometimes.
They were away from home for months, and
oh my God.
Yeah, I would love to have just been a little fly on the studio wall just to watch them play this, to watch the emotion come out. When they were recording La Villa, they had to do it in multiple takes. Just watching all of that, just them thinking on the whatever take they're doing, they said, okay, we have to give it as much energy as the very first take. And yeah, that is extremely exhausting, but it's a mark of professionals and people who care about their art.
You mentioned being a fly on the wall. I want to be a fly on the wall the first time they played through Prelude and Neil hit that triangle. We can't not mention that little triangle.
That's true.
And you have to
that will always make me think of Jerry.
Yes.
From the Rush cast now, when he was on stage with Spirit of Rush, and he had his big moment. Ding.
And he hit it just at the.
I used to get a kick out of going to the concerts and watching some of the air drummers and air guitarists and air bass players.
Yeah, I think I air drummed through the entire Signals concert. That was my first concert.
Farewell to Kings, watching everybody doing the Farewell to Kings. Oh God, that was incredible. Anyway.
That's amazing. This is an amazing album. So for those who have not really dove into Hemispheres that much and really are maybe only familiar with the trees and La Villa, check out the rest of it. Check out the other two, Hemispheres and Circumstances. Yeah, just check them all out. They're just fantastic. So you guys, closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts on this album?
Great chat.
Yeah,
have some fun.
This was great.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for having me be part of this. I really enjoyed talking about this album that I love, but talking about this song that I love. And for you guys out there watching, I hope you're still with us. And if you are, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And let us, like Donna said before, let us know what you think of these songs in the comments. We're going to check them out, and we'll get back to you. Until then, thanks, you guys. Take it easy.
Bye, everybody.